Round number 2 of the Rochester, Minnesota Championship. I am playing with the white pieces against Michael Kern. Michael Kern is here. He was the 1 seed based on random seed order for this 6-player round robin. He had 1 point. I had 1 point. We're going head to head. I have the white pieces, and Michael's a good friend of mine. We've played many times. I've known him since he was young. And I decided to start with d4. And after d5, we went into a Slav Exchange. So recently we have played 1e4, and that was a Potter variation game, and I was able to get the win with a nice kingside attack. In this game, though, I decided to go d4 and thought, let's play a little bit positional, and I had some ideas in this Slav Exchange. So I started with knight c3 and bishop f4. This move order can be a little bit tricky, so if you play the Slav for either side, take note of this move order. What can happen is sometimes black can get stuck with the knight and bishop out, and white can hit them with an early queen to b3. So that's all I'm going to say for this recap on this line, but take a look at this. If you play the Slav Exchange for either side, it can be pretty tricky for black. So here Michael plays e6. And he's told me many times that he doesn't spend a lot of time working on openings. And I think that's maybe the biggest weakness that he has. He's a really strong player. He can find good moves quickly. He's good at tactics. And I think if he works on his openings, and him and I talked about this between rounds, I think he could be 2000 in no time. And after this event, he was already close to 1800, and he has a ton of potential. So here I played e3. What I'm doing now is I'm looking at the fact that this c8 bishop is locked in behind the pawns, but my f4 bishop is outside of the pawns. So that's one small imbalance that I can play with to try to play for an advantage. Here he goes bishop to d6, and I had reviewed these lines prior to our game a little bit, some of the different Slav Exchange structures, and I knew I wanted to trade here and put my pawn on f4. So this is what I went for. And the idea is this bishop on f1 is the opposite color of these 3 pawns. It's going to park on d3, and they're going to work together, the bishop and the pawns. The bishop on c8 is having a little bit of trouble getting into the game. It's still boxed in by these pawns. Bishop d7, bishop to d3, pointing at the king side. a6. And here I was thinking Michael might be looking to play bishop to b5 at some point when it's safe. Try to trade off the bad bishop for my good bishop. Played knight f3, knight c6. So now bishop b5 is probably not happening anytime soon. Castle, castle, rook c1. And I played rook c1 because this is the open file. Usually you want the rooks on the open files as soon as possible. Oftentimes I tell people, what's the most important thing in the position? And if there's an open file, that's usually the most important factor in the position. So that's kind of running through my head too. What would I tell a student? Put your rooks on the open file. Don't delay. In hindsight, though, I think it was a little bit stronger to delay this rook to c1 and go for the kingside attack. So eventually I went for a kingside attack. I think if I'm going to do it, it makes more sense to play knight e5 straight away. Wait a little bit on playing rook to c1. But it's a minor difference. So rook c1 played knight a5. He's trying to come into c4. That makes sense. I played knight e5. And now I have knight and bishop both defending this c4 square. So there's no knight c4 immediately. Rook a c8. And here I go aggressive. I play rook to f3 with the idea of swinging the rook over to h3. And after the game, I was thinking maybe this wasn't the best way to play it. This could be something that I could improve on, not going so hard on the kingside attack. And then I look at the engine, and Stockfish likes pawn to g4. So it still likes going for the kingside attack, just not lifting this rook up immediately. So that's something that I can learn from. The rook up immediately might be a bit slow because now our queen does not guard g4, so I can't easily push that pawn up. Knight c4 played, and this is a small mistake. I really like this tactic that I played in the game, rook to h3. So the knight's attacking b2, and at first glance I thought, well, I'll have to defend the b2 pawn. Maybe I'll play rook c2, maybe I'll play queen e2, but I need to defend this pawn. Then I started calculating and I thought, wonder if I could get away with this. And the idea is if knight takes b2, forking queen and bishop, there's this really cool tactic. Bishop takes h7 check. And after knight takes h7, the queen flies out to h5. This is a forced mate in 2. Black cannot escape. If the knight moves, queen h8 is mate. And if the rook moves, queen takes f7. Let's just show this line. King moves, knight g6 mate. So this configuration of knight, rook, and queen is very powerful. The black king gets stuck here, and a checkmate follows. So rook h3, if knight takes b2, takes, and the king moves over. So now we're looking at what's the best discovered check. This does get a little bit complicated, and Michael and I looked at this after the game, and we thought the strongest move was queen to e1, simply sidestepping the queen from the attack of the knight. And the idea is queen to h4 next, and then move the bishop, followed by mate. And the computer confirms with a plus 20 eval, and black's best move is queen takes knight, sacrificing the queen. So Michael played g6, strongest move. And here I play queen to e2. As we'll see in the next move, this was a bit of a mistake. I should just play bishop takes c4 immediately because I'm doing it on the next move, and it actually gave my opponent a free move. So bishop takes c4 immediately would have been the strongest, followed by queen e1 and trying to come out to h4 for the attack. I play queen e2, guarding this pawn, queen b4. So now Michael has a double attack, and I like how he's playing this. He's putting pressure on me. He's not allowing me to easily build my kingside attack. So now I had to take. And the reason I have to take is because once I relieve this tension, I can continue the attack. Queen f2, coming out to the h4 square. Bishop c6. And here I was pretty quick to take off that bishop. I felt that black was getting a lot of counterplay down the diagonal. I didn't like how that bad bishop all of a sudden turned into a strong piece. My natural instinct was, let's snap off that bishop straight away. This was a mistake though. Pawn to g4 would have been stronger. The bishop isn't doing much immediately. There's no big threats. And let's say black puts a rook in the center, just for an example. f5 could be played, striking at the black pawns on the light squares. So that's an improvement for me. Pawn to g4. Knight takes c6 was played. Rook takes. Rook to c2 guards the b2 pawn. That frees my queen to come out to h4 for the attack. Queen a5. A little bit of a mistake. h5 or king g7 are stronger because maybe this queen can still come back on this diagonal. After queen a5, queen h4, there's a threat on the knight, and if the knight moves, there's a checkmate. If knight h5 is played, pawn to g4, taking the knight again with a mate threat. So here Michael plays queen to d8, and I missed a strong move. I looked at it briefly, and for some reason I thought that knight to e4 was stronger, so I played knight to e4 in the game. Look at this move, queen to h6. The idea is now we could play knight e4 or g4, g5, and black's in a bit of trouble here. If rook to e8 is played, for example, g4, king h8, there's this kind of cool move, king to f1, getting the king out of danger. It's a little bit complicated, but there's no checks on the king if the queen, let's say the black queen lands here. King g8. Now we can play g5, sack the rook, and knight to e4. Knight's heading to f6, queen's eyeing at h7. This is almost a checkmate. It's a forced mate in 10, according to the computer. I played knight to e4 here right away. Michael found the strongest move, knight h5. And at this point, I was looking really hard at queen takes d8 or knight to g5, which I ended up playing in the game. We had calculated in our post-game analysis that queen takes d8 should be winning for white. But we did miss how much counterplay black could get. So let's say I do trade queens. g4. The idea is, the knight goes to g7, there's knight f6 check, followed by winning the h pawn. Okay, but black can play f5, counterattack. And after G takes, F takes E, H takes, Rook G2, trying to win this pawn. You can win the pawn. Or a pawn, I should say. You can win B7. Black can play Rook D5 here, and the position's actually close to equal. Black is getting a little counterplay. The C pawn can push soon. So this probably was still the way to play it once I got to that position. But instead I opted for knight to G5, and I kind of missed the resource of H6. And during the game, G4 did not cross my mind. I mean, I looked at it very briefly, but I thought, well, just this gets played on my queen. And after takes, this knight doesn't have to move immediately. But it's actually more dangerous than I thought for black. The knight can't move, and we're ready to take the knight, opening up the black king even further. So that was something that maybe I should have looked at a little more in depth. On to G4. Instead, I move the knight back and we trade queens. F5, knight C5, and now I'm playing aggressive, attacking the G pawn, double my rooks on that G pawn. And now this knight can't retreat, and this rook is tied down, but I'm using 3 pieces to tie down 2. So during the game, I felt like actually black might have the advantage here because I'm using 3 pieces to tie down 2, and there is the potential pass pawn for black sitting here on C4. So if these pawns start pushing, I have to be very careful. B5 played, A3, A5. And here there's a really cool idea that I didn't consider. I could leave these 3 pieces here and play king to F2. And after B4, Rook G1, takes, C3 is played, I can just start bringing the king over this way. So get ready to round up that pawn with my king while these 2 pieces are tied, actually 3 pieces are tied down for black. So it's kind of this rook and pawn against my king with the help of the knight or rook if I need it. This would have been a nice way to play it, and I think it's a way for white to push for a win, even though it may still be draw territory with best play. I play rook back to C2. Now I'm a little bit worried about this pawn. Rook F7, king F2, knight F6. I swap, and now I know I want this king centralized, and I still want to play aggressive. I'm looking for winning chances. I play E4, trying to bring my king up. Rook F7, king E3. Michael plays B4, and I drop this rook back so he can come help out soon. I think he's playing this well. He's putting the pressure on me when he can. This is rook on B7, trying to infiltrate. He checks and I block, and now he plays A4, so that if I take, he can take back with the A pawn. Then he'd have connect passers, which would be very strong. This was kind of a key moment of the endgame, though. I played D5, and I'm starting to get my own counterplay. King D4 coming, and I'm creating a passed pawn here. Michael plays rook C to B6. It was a little bit stronger to take first, because now my king comes up. E takes, and a nice practical decision by Michael, rook to F6, making me think about how do I defend this pawn, and I make a mistake here, and it's a pretty big mistake. If I play king C5, this pawn cannot be captured because of D6. So this pawn is too hard for black to stop. If rook to F7, I can go king up to C6, supporting the pawn. There's not anything that black can do. I think this is probably already winning with best play. So I play rook F1 in the game. Rook to F5. Rook takes C4. Rook takes A3. Slight advantage for white. Hard to say if it's winning. It probably is if I can get this pawn going. So I go D6. Rook A2. And here I played this move kind of on autopilot. I play rook to C7 check, followed by D7. And I think at this point I had like 2 minutes left, but there was a 30-second increment. And my opponent, Michael, had, I believe, 50 minutes. He was playing really quickly, even though we started with 60. I'm checking right now. Let's move 48. Yeah, he had about 40 minutes, and I had about 2 minutes. That's a good thing to learn about, for time management. I should save a little bit of time for endgames because I was not able to find the win here, which is rook to d1. Rook takes f4 is fine. I move the king, and now we have a rook behind the passed pawn. That's a win for white. I play d7, and after check, he doubles on the d. I can't defend this pawn, and there is a repetition. It doesn't help if I bring the king this way because he's going to take my pawn in the end. Here we agreed to a draw. Nice game by Michael. I was pretty happy with the game because I was never worse, I don't think, or not much worse. But I did miss a lot of chances to play for larger advantages, and I missed the win in the end game. That's the round 2 standings, and in round 3, I will be white against David McNeil, who has half a point. And I think the main takeaways for this game for me was looking for this G4 idea right around here, saving a little bit of time on the clock for the complex endgames, and then also working on my calculation a bit right around this point when I'm going for the attack. If I can find Queen H6 here, I can start to play for the win. The way I played it kind of took us into draw territory. So hope you guys enjoyed this round 2 recap of the Rochester Championship. I will see you for round number 3. I'm going to put a link to the game that Michael and I played in the Potter variation up above if you want to check that out.